Hi, this is Roger, thanks for dropping by. I'm going to have a go at repotting my Japanese white pine. It's going to have quite a dramatic change of angle, which may involve taking off a few more roots than I would actually want to. The amount of roots I want to take off is as little as possible. I don't want to disturb the roots any more than necessary. I'm just going to take off enough to get it in the new pot because it's a change of shape. It's going from a rectangular to an oval, so obviously the corners of the rectangle will have to come off completely and basically shape the root mass to the size of the pot, less about half an inch at the most, a centimetre, for the new media. So that's the idea. I'm very aware that these do not like to be soggy in the winter, so the media that's going to go in there is going to allow for very good drainage basically. Now there's a question for you which I would like an answer in the comments. This, let's get my coffee out of the way before we start flinging dirt around. This pot has got this in it. Now I'm pretty confident that is some sort of fertilizer. I don't know what, but whatever it is some sort of slow release feed. What I would like to know is, does it run out before it disintegrates? In other words, if I can still see it like this, is it still working? Because if it's still working, it can go back on. In other words, as the nutrients are used up, does it disappear, or do you still end up with that where it's producing no nutrients at all because it's exhausted? I don't know the answer to that, but I would like to know. So I'm just going to put that to one side. I will put it back on even if it does no good and the answer comes up in the comments. Now the other thing I've noticed on here, some of these buds on this tree are going to flower. Now that doesn't do it any good at all. You want candles, don't want flowers. But there are definitely some flower buds. These are not candles. Now with this type of pine, if you get flowers, you can still get a candle. They tend to push up through the flower buds as the year progresses. Taking them off is a right faff. But it is probably a good idea to do so rather than let it flower, because obviously to produce the flowers and the pollen and everything that would be generated, it's going to use quite a lot of energy. That energy would be much better put into candles, but to force the energy into the candles you've got to get rid of the flower buds, which is a pain. Anyway, let's get it out of the pot. This will be the first time that I've seen what's in the pot. Let's hope we've got a good root system. This would be an import from Japan, but whether it was imported in the year I bought it or the year before or prior, I just don't know. I don't have that information. Well, it's come out of the pot okay. There's actually nothing wrong with that pot. It could just go back in the same pot, you know. I did a little bit of work. I just put Japanese white pine bonsai into Google and then clicked on images, and I would say at least a third of the images that came up that were decent bonsai trees, not sticks in pots, were in rectangular unglazed pots, which leaves 2/3 that weren't. But quite a large proportion of those were in oval unglazed pots. But I think the rectangular ones just about outnumbered the ovals. Some were in round unglazed pots. Some were in the tiniest pot you could imagine for the size of the tree. Which certainly emphasises a literati style, you know, that works well for that sort of thing. That's not what this tree is. And then some were in glazed pots, and they were in the minority, and I think there is a general consensus, you know, one of these sort of unwritten rules, I suppose you could say, that conifers tend to go in unglazed pots and deciduous trees go in glazed pots. That's the theory. And we've got the little bits of mesh. We'll save them and reuse them. They were just placed, these are not wired in. We usually put wire on them to hold them in place, but it was using the wire that holds the tree in to actually hold the mesh as well. Cool, that's well in there. Isn't that what scissors are for, Roger? Yes, of course it is. There we go. That was a root got through it, that's what it was. Well, that's a good sign. Now the next thing is we've got to try and get the wire out, which means finding it. Now I'm going to take the moss off, but I'm going to try and save some of the good moss to try and restart it again. It's not essential, but I quite like having some moss on the tree, but I don't want the wrong sort of moss. I only want this nice pad moss, as I call it. If I see any sign of that, it's coming off. That stuff doesn't do the tree any good at all. And I don't want moss over the whole base, you know, when I've repotted it. I just want some. It'll get going again. But what I do want off is this type of moss. You have to go down into the soil if you want to get rid of that. If you just scratch it off the surface, it'll come back straight away. I still haven't found that wire. It's in there somewhere. Nearer the trunk, should be able to find it. Oh well, no luck so far. This looks to be in quite a moisture retentive soil, but then the chances are it was potted in Japan and it may have been kept in a nursery where it had winter protection. In other words, it was taken out of the rain and the snow and all that sort of stuff. And they were more interested in keeping it hydrated in the growing season. Try and get as much of this moss off of the trunk as I can. Actually quite a nice trunk base on this. Not bad at all. Must get myself a little toothbrush to use on mossy trunks. It's the easiest thing to do. I mean, I've seen people use like a little wire brush, but that does actually scratch, whereas a toothbrush will just gently get it off. Probably take a few more goes to get it off. I still haven't found that flipping wire. How deep it's in. Might end up having to stay there. Right, so that's got the moss off. That's all I wanted to do really, round the top. And then I'm going to cut the corners off because it will be quicker in the long run to just take them off so that we've got our shape for our new pot. We'll just take the corners off. And then we'll get the pot up here and see if I've taken enough off. Certainly a nice lot of grit in the bottom of this pot, so obviously it has been, well, you think we've had periods of very wet since I got this tree, and it's still healthy. It hasn't died, so obviously it has been draining quite well, because the roots can deteriorate quite badly if they remain soggy for any length of time. It needs to be drained. Right, let's see how near we are to fitting in the pot. Shouldn't be far off now, I don't think. haven't taken any soil off the bottom yet. I will do. I just, as I said, I just want to. It needs that done to it, effectively, and I think I will do that by doing this rather than cutting, so that we tease the roots out in that area, so that lots of good roots showing here. Very pleased. There's a huge amount of grit in the bottom of this. What was the bottom of this pot? So obviously it was potted up, bearing in mind it must not stay soggy. I mean, there are a lot of cases where this, where these trees would be growing in the wild. They get quite a dry, cold winter. They don't get soggy, wet winters like we get here. They tend to get cold winters, more in the lines of snow rather than rain, and cold and freezing and all that sort of stuff. So the roots wouldn't be in wet all the time. Something worth bearing in mind when you get a tree that you really have no clue as to how long it's been in its pot. You've got something like this, or a root hook, and you poke it up into the bottom and it's rock hard. It means that tree's in concrete in that area. Now that's not the end of the world, but teasing it a bit does help if you can sort of poke your prongs or your root hook up through it, so that again it allows for more drainage. Right, how are we doing? Right, that goes in there okay, but we do have to bear in mind I've got a couple of really thick roots sticking down that's going to stop it getting down into the pot, so we'll take those off. I don't want to take the feeder roots off, these are just the thick ones. The ones that have done the job. Right, we still didn't find that wire. Right, now I've got to try and remember the decision that was made about the angle. I know it had to become a lot more upright and pointing backwards, so it was somewhere like that. Now obviously that's going to stick right up out of the pot. So to get this in level, this lump here is going to have to come off. So again, we'll just do that by reducing it down. It might have to stick up a bit in its first repot. It might just have to stick up and be a little mound for a while. Because I'm going to have the tree moving over to the left, I don't want the trunk dead centre, I want it slightly offset to the, the tree's going to go to the right, I want it offset to the left, so I don't want it central. I think that'll do. Some fine adjustments. Actually, I think that, well, that's where I want it, so this bit is going to stick up for now. You know, obviously this, I've already taken off more than I wanted to, but that gets it roughly where I want it. Right, so we'll get rid of the rubbish, come back, and we will not forget to put our wire in the wire holes before we put the media in. We will not forget to do that this time. Otherwise I'll have people shouting at the screen, "You've forgotten the wire again, Roger." I can't hear you when you do that, you know, but I know I've done it. I've shouted at a screen before now. It's quite satisfying, but you know flipping well nobody can hear you except yourself. Right, so we will put that to one side and have a clear up, and I'll be back with some media, obviously, and wire and stuff. Right, I've got lots of old bits of wire here because I am getting a bit short on wire. I'm going to have to put an order in, but I haven't done it yet. And I like to save wire that's been used for things like wiring a plant in a pot. It's going to be below ground, isn't it? It doesn't matter if it's got a few kinks in it. You're going to pull those straight anyway when you pull it tight. So, yeah. I think I'm going to try the principle that was used before, whereby the wire holds the mesh in place, if you see what I mean. So we'll use this piece of wire up through the hole, over the side so that it doesn't pull through, which it promptly does, up the other end. Make sure we get a nice tight bit along the bottom, and then the idea is we will put the mesh over that wire and seat it down nicely, and that's where it will stay, because the media is going to go straight in on top of it, and it can be held in place, so it saves messing about with those little butterfly things. They're always a bit fiddly. And then there's less bits hanging out the bottom of the pot as well. So, so that's 2 wires, and that would probably hold the tree anyway. But for once I've actually got a tree with actual wire holes, so well, why not use them? That's what they're there for. So we will have a wire going across the tree as well. Probably in my case for the first time ever. I don't think I've had a pot with proper wire holes before now, which is good. Right, there we go. Ready for the tree. Next we want, I'm still going to carry on using this stuff to go in the bottom of the pot. I know this tree is not going to be in this pot for 4 or 5 years. It's going to come out. The reason I know that is because it won't be quite at the right angle this time round. So consequently it'll need another repot with a similar process as I've just done to get it to the right angle, but I just didn't want to do it all at once. Right, so that's a place for the water to be while it, you know, finds its way out of that, out of the mesh and out of the holes. Right, now this is an incredibly gritty mix. Where's my trowel? I don't normally muck about with trowels. I just use my hands normally. But we want a layer of this. This is very gritty, but it does have, you know, some substance in it as well. And it's slightly acidic. It has actually got some ericaceous compost as part of it. Right, let's see if we can get this roughly where I want it. Over to the left and pointing backwards. Yeah, we are going to have stuff sticking out. Never mind, that's where I want it. try and get it in a bit lower. Yep, that's about it. Now, I need to get media in here because there's a hollow, so we will fill that bit up first. Knock the tree, why don't you? Back it out of the way. That's better. Right, let's see what we can do then. Who has stolen my... Oh, there it is. I was just going to say, who's stolen my chopstick? There'll be trouble. Get that right in underneath there. More than enough in that hollow there to have pushed down underneath. Right, just compress this a little bit, make sure it's firm, and then we'll tie it in. It's going to be the best side to come with this. I think I need to come this side because this sticks up, so I need to be able to hold that down so that the wind doesn't dislodge it. If I go round the back, I won't be able to see the wire. That's good, but it allows the tree to tip. So we're going to have to go this side, which is a shame because we will see the wire. But it's the tree that's important. Right, what are we going to do then? We've just disturbed the roots. So what do we want the tree to do? We want it to grow roots. How do we get it to grow roots? We need a good set of solar panels up in the top of the tree. So all of the foliage on the tree, including the new candles, get left to grow. That will increase the needle mass, increase the ability to photosynthesize. That energy gets pushed down, generates roots, help fill up the new media, get a decent root system feeds the tree, and so it goes on. So we won't really be taking much of the needle mass off, if any, this year, And if that means I get long candles, so be it. They certainly won't get touched until after they've matured and opened up and have been used to help feed the tree. And if that works and we do generate a really good root system, then the tree becomes strong relatively quickly, possibly even in that first year. And if that's the case, then all the auxins will be sat in the tips of those candles that have been allowed to grow and extend and probably get quite long needles and, you know, start annoying everyone. But as a consequence, you've got all that energy surging up and down the tree. You take the tips of those new growths off, they're no longer candles, they are now growths, yeah? The needles have opened, they've started to harden off, change of colour and all that. If you take those tips off then, and take those new shoots off at that point, all that energy's got to go somewhere. That's where you get your back bud in. If that's what you want. And under normal circumstances, who doesn't? Right, it's in there. This bit does stick up a bit, so be it. Funny, I can tell roughly how long I've been filming by how cold my coffee is. Right, let's see if we can get a bit of moss going. Don't want much, just a little bit of green. It will spread on its own. That's if the birds don't steal it, of course. It's not past nesting time yet. There's still birds out there building nests. And as long as they're building nests, they see nesting material. That's it, they'll have it. So be it. Right, we will top dress the rest of it with some grit, just to top it off. Not on the moss gets to stay on the surface. And I'm virtually out of grit now. This is the last amount of grit that I could usefully use, basically. It's starting to get a bit dusty in the bottom of the bag. You just shake it to get the smaller bits, the pieces up above. Right, that will do. Right, now the only other thing is to put these black bits back on again. Until somebody tells me I'm wasting my time, they just as well go back where they came from, which is relatively evenly spaced around the pot as a slow release feed. And give this a good water. We haven't got rain forecasts at the moment, we've got a drier spell, and hopefully it's going to get warmer as well because it's been cold the last few nights. Right, so I'll take the camera off. I wonder if I could just get a little bit more grit on that lumpy bit there. I suspect the first time I water it's going to wash it all off. It'll all come over the side of the pot. To do it very gently. Right, get the camera off the tripod so that you can see where I'm getting here. We'll use that to raise it up a bit so that we can get a better look. Right, prepare to be seasick. There we go, all my dusty hands all over my camera now, so that'll have to have a good wipe off. And just pull that curtain across a bit, get a more even light.
Right then, so that's what I was after. Slightly offset to allow, probably heading towards 2/3 of the tree will be off to the right of the upright, yeah? Leaving 1/3 off to the left as a sequence of pads heading up to then curve over the top. So that's what I was after, and to do that the tree had to be tipped backwards so that it's more upright, and I will tip it a little bit more backwards next time it gets repotted, but couldn't be done all at once. So that's my initial styling and the repot. We now leave the tree to its own devices, apart from I will attempt to take those flower buds off. Well, that's a fiddly flipping job. But it needs to be done. It'll sap the strength. I want all the strength now to go into producing as much needle mass as possible. And in doing so, I will regenerate a better root system into the new media and progress the tree that way. And then come the end of the season, when all that new growth, hopefully, that we've got has hardened off, we'll look at cutting that back. And in theory, we should then get some back budding, which gives me more choices next year of what to take off and what to keep, but not this year. So there we go then. Japanese white pine, endearingly known as my birthday tree, in a new pot with some new media around the outside and underneath, and hopefully it will now grow on successfully. Job done.